How do we
Mm,
shake things up? How do we spark that next conversation in a different way? Because if we're all frozen, that's not going to do anyone service. We all
yeah.
need a voice at the table in times of change. Hi, I'm Jennifer Britton, and welcome to the Coaching Money Podcast. I've been on a mission for the last 20 years to expand the coaching conversation to many. Along with my co-host, Ivana Valley, we're going to be exploring coaching as it relates to conversations, connection, and change in both personal and professional settings. Coaching Many is about creating empowering and thought-provoking spaces for conversation which strengthen relationships and enhance results. Throughout the Coaching Many podcast, we'll share tools, practices, and approaches to support you in your conversations, one dialogue at a time. So welcome back, everyone. Today, we are here to talk about connection and belonging. We've actually done another episode on the 6 layers of connection, but here's the thing. One of the things we always hear about is why would you choose group and team coaching over one-on-one? And I think a big part of it is this yearning of the world today to really feel connected in and to feel part of a bigger whole. So we're going to do today's episode on belonging and just see where this evolves to. And so as a listener, if you're with us today, what does belonging mean to you? How do you see this in the span of group coaching? And I want to bring your voice in, Ivana, when you think about our work, your work, circles, the groups that you're working with, like where does belonging play into the whole ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's fundamental to have this be I'm just thinking about the holidays coming up. This is going to be rolling out in the new year, but like the centerpiece.
Mm.
I'm just getting the metaphor I'm getting is the centerpiece of the table, the centerpiece of the conversation. We talk about intentionality and goals, but belonging, especially in a coaching many conversation, is how do we do that? How do we allow people to come as who they are? Like, to me, part of this is like the authenticity piece. In the ICF world, like creating the container, that trust, safety, and connection, so people can come and be in a circle and let their guard down and be themselves and be whole in who they are. Because, I think we live in a world where we have to project ourselves to be this and be that and this and that. And so I think central to our conversations, and we create this intentionality in our training programs, but also we advocate this in our coaching many conversations, even the work that I do, whether it be one-on-one for that matter, or even in a many conversation, is creating a space of belonging is fundamental. I think of the work of Brene Brown, because I'm heavily influenced. I'm a trained facilitator in her work, and she really
Mhm.
distinguishes like belonging versus fitting in. So if you have to morph yourself and change who you are to be able to fit in and express yourself, then that actually isn't a culture of belonging. It's actually fitting in, which is like not authenticity at all. And so
Mhm.
that's when I
Mhm.
think of belonging. That's what I think of. And even being that for myself, creating spaces and containers. This is one of the reasons why I continue to cherish you and work with you, both at Potential Realize, is you allow me to show up for who I am and all my strengths. And I think you advocate that for me as a team, but also how are we advocating that in our own groups, in our own families for that matter, in any space context that we really immerse ourselves in.
Yeah, we have to be who we are, right? In a world of a lot of pressure. Again, I think for
Yeah.
so many, it's one, people may not be aware of who they really are because I think many systems that we're part of may
Mhm.
pressurize people to act a certain way, to be a certain way. And I think there's courage in today's world to go your own path. It's a very courageous move to be able to say, this is who I am. And but it is at the heart of what we do as group and team coaches. And I think in working with our peers in a group process, we learn so much about ourselves through the contrast
Mhm.
of others. So it's interesting, even as we frame today's topic of belonging, it's also, to me, it's the deeper web of connectivity. because we may see in a group that actually we don't necessarily belong, but we belong for moments. Like, I think we also want to recognize that we are all on different pathways, and we may have these hubs, these moments of connection and deep conversation. And then we go off and we do our own thing in very different landscapes. To me, that's the real power of this work, is that we can be together with people that in our regular course of the day, we might not ever cross paths, but yet we have this shared interest and possibly shared not even value systems sometimes. Because I really think of the very diverse groups that I work with. And what is the glue that brings us together for moments? It's our connection to a cause or a purpose or an interest even. And those make it really, really different. So yeah, let's talk about, like, how do we do this? How do you cultivate the trust? How do you cultivate the safety? Because the rooms that I've been part of in the last few months, it's really the discourse around trust is at its lowest. People are disengaged. Yet, I think about the conversations that I've seen in the coaching space. It's the flip side. So is what we do really creating these spaces for people to be able to show up and have the conversations that they can't have other places? What do you think?
I think so. I think so. And I think, circling back to what you said, I think part of that trust, safety, and connection is allowing people to show up in what's different amongst us, but also it being okay. It's kind of like that elephant in the room. I even look back at my own journey as a group coach, an individual coach, like really wanting to like construct a space of, truthfully, my own comfort. So that way I could feel like I could be supportive. But in growth of the client, in growth of the participants in our groups, in our coaching many conversation, it's in that discomfort and us being okay that things are going to be shifting, things are going to be active, that there's going to have a difference of opinion, and creating that to be okay, like allowing the elephant in the room, but also not bogging ourselves down in that in that being a bad thing, if I can say, but allowing space for all voices, diverse voices. Yes, that whole inclusivity, but part of the inclusivity is allowing the diversity. It's
of
that
course.
whole dance.
Thank you for that reframe, right? Because belonging is harnessing who we are in our uniqueness. So I think, I take a very Toronto view of this. And I know you're from this area originally, but last night I stumbled across a really fun moment that happened heart of Toronto. It depends on what part of the city you're in, but like Yonge and Bloor is always considered the heart of the city. So there was someone who, the subway is breaking down a lot of times, but people were on the subway platform singing together this holiday carol. And like there's 20 people from 20 different backgrounds. And Toronto is now the most, multicultural city of the world. And I think in moments, we're not a perfect city, but I think there is this celebration that we are all completely different people, yet we are all Torontonians, like we are all Canadian, which is part of the belonging. Like we all belong to the city in our very different ways. My neighborhood might be different from someone else's neighborhood. But we share these moments as a city of like, oh, we're stuck in traffic or we're stuck on a breakdown with the TTC. And so I think that to me has really been a driving force of some of the work that I do in terms of how do we welcome people into conversations, because setting people up for a deep dive where you can bring yourself is very different than many other conversations. So I naturally go to, what do we do? So how do we create these spaces of like, bring yourself, bring your uniqueness. And I think part of it is the tools that we
Absolutely
start with. So, we're recording this, we're preparing for our holiday party. It's our 21st anniversary holiday party. I can't believe it. But, I'm going to bring in the charms, which have really been the runaway success sort of like product of the year. And in bringing people into the conversation, like, if you see 40 charms on a page, That's 40 different options of how you want to show them. Yet they're all part of the same ecosystem. So I think, again, we want to be exploring how do we invite people into the conversation? Because I think for many people today, it's hard when you're challenged to ask, what do you bring?
Mhm.
How do I respond to that? Like, how do I respond to that in a context where I read about an organization, like the flip side of belonging, which is polarization. An organization, supposedly, this may be hearsay, but this is what I read on the HR Wire, that they went out and asked, how stressed do you feel in the organization today? And then they turned around and said, oh, thank you for engaging in our survey. And, we're a health and wellness organization, so we need our people to be role models. If you answered stressed, you are now out of a job.
Wow.
Unbelievable. I don't know if this is one of those myths or is this a rumor, but like, wow, ethically, wow. How could you do that? How could you
Yeah.
ask people for a survey response and then totally obliterate that trust and go after people and take away their job? Unbelievable. But I'm hearing stories from lots of different
Sure.
pockets of the world where many organizations have embarked on building trust, but actually they're decimating trust more quickly than building it because they're using unethically information to shape their workforce. So,
Well, wow. First of all, I got to say that again because I'm like, holy, I did not read that article, but I received all the information you said. And it's absolutely wow. To me, it goes back to our earlier conversation about that pressurized. Imagine being those employees, assuming we're going to just say this, assuming that
assume.
there's accuracy to
Yeah.
this, like them speaking their truth, then being vulnerable, then being courageous, as you said. Belonging takes courage to then it come back at you in a negative way. And let's like take it away from this example to that mindset, like that inquiry for all of you listening, going back to your space, going back to your marketing. Even I think about the ethics. Do the people that you actually know and are inviting, even the language of inviting people into the conversation, are they actually clear that what they're signing up for? In terms of
Yes.
belonging, like
Yes.
the basics of belonging in the coaching many conversation, even in the one-on-one, not everyone actually wants coaching. Not everyone is ready or wanting that self-discovery. Who am I? How do I
Mhm.
actually want to be in this organization, in this conversation, in this turbulence of change? So when we talk about tools, I love your charms. I was saying this to you before, just the conversation that it's activating, even from a language standpoint, the interpretation of these tools, but more basic than that. I think really, especially for newer coaches, as I said, I reflected back on my life. Are you actually really clear on what you're offering to be able to create that that centerpiece of belonging at your
Yes.
table? And are
Mhm.
you clear in communicating that? Because we see this in group coaching essentials, team coaching essentials so often. Like people come thinking that it's one thing when really it's something absolutely different. And how does that look? Are you doing your community a service?
Yeah. Trust is at the heart of all this work, and we can't really, again, it becomes a moral and ethical issue. So, how are we truly creating safety? If this is what people's experiences in the outside world,
Mhm.
how is that showing up when people join or choose not to join? Because my concern is that this is going to create, back to the word polarization, it's going to create more silos, people really thinking twice. Well, do I say anything? Right. And
Sure.
if we really have an era of disengagement, how do you bring people back from that? It's got to be through
Hmm.
dialogue, but dialogue has to be two-way. So
Yeah.
I think it's a responsibility for all of us who are hosting
Yeah.
conversations. How do we ensure and how do we once again go back to working with people to co-create, to have
Yeah.
agreements in place? Do we need to revisit our agreements? Maybe that's part of this messaging as well, is we need to revisit what we've agreed to in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I know we have an episode on co-creating the agreements.
Yes.
So we're going to reference that, but we're touching on a lot of different things that we've touched on in other episodes. But this really speaks to the core of, these are the foundations, we'll say, of belonging. What I'm really hearing, even for me, and I think I need to have a moment of pause and do some reflection on this myself. Like, what are the things in my I'll say tool belt, that I have access to create that belonging? What are those things? One thing that we've touched on is the competencies are definitely, in terms of the foundation for us as coaches. Are we really honoring those competencies? And that's where mentor coaching comes in terms of really re-anchoring that for us. And then as we move into the coaching many conversation, you're touching on tools. So are we actually creating tools, charms,
Cards,
your conversation sparker, cards, dice, all this stuff. And I've been having such a joy in this writing sprint with you, because you are a genius at bringing diverse tools to start conversations, to provoke thinking, to actually
thinking.
to provoke thinking, to even open shifts of perspective and approaches to problems. And as we say, we're in times of change and in chaos. There's the left brain, and a lot of us live in the left brain. And how can we activate that creative? And your charms, your tools is definitely a way to do that. So this is another bucket of thinking about belonging. Absolutely.
Activating it. And I think in creating spaces of belonging, it is when we have that, when we feel like we can show up as who we are, we can create, we can innovate. And so I think I want to reframe this as, okay, maybe we don't feel we have it, but what if we can create it? What is possible then? Because I think we are really in a moment, at least right now when we're recording this, with such uncertainty that it's paralyzing people. And paralysis is not a good energy. And so that's where I see, not only with the conversation zone, but like these creative sparkers, it, as you said really eloquently, it can get us into a new perspective. And I really feel, as a creator, that's been my driving force this year. How do we shake things up? How do we spark that next conversation in a different way? Because if we're all frozen, that's not going to do anyone service. We all need a voice at the table in times of change. And so again, I think listening into past episodes, we have other episodes in the pipeline as well, our experiential episode. I think it will be interesting for listeners to listen to this episode on belonging along with that, because experiential means drawing from our experience. So how do we bring our life, our moments, our inquiries to the table in service for our learning, but other people's learning? Because it is a collaborative learning space. So
and I'm gonna may I bring the conversation forward, because I think there's another bucket around.
There's two more buckets. So you do another one, and then I'm going to come to the landscape of AI, because that we are on the precipice of massive change because of that. So go ahead.
Beautiful. So I don't know if we're both on the same page, but I think in terms of like the practicality of what we're talking about, I think is really comes to design, really designing to create belonging. So we touched on, the trust, safety, and connection. We touched on the 6 layers of connection, but what are those pieces? And even with the work that we do in group coaching essentials, how do you create that container? But what are those pieces that allow you to create that trust, those processes that support that? So, recalls, are you doing like how are you doing those things to allow people to then show up and know that this is a container where I can let my guard down, so that people know this is what I'm signing up for, things like that. I've drawn a blank to, even like the setup of a first conversation, which is very different. I'm going to say this, kudos to people who are so skilled and trained in training and facilitation, because there are layers and aspects of that. But your approach coming from a coaching mindset, design looks very different. And we see this with people who come through our programs, like, because they can't quite get over the hump of, but I've been doing this for years and years. Yeah, you have, and it serves a purpose. But to get below, again, using your intellectual property, below that waterline, to get into those deeper assumptions, those deeper values, those belief systems, you can't do it in facilitation and training as effectively. I don't think you can do it actually at all. but that's my stake in the ground. You have to really bring a coaching approach to it. And that does require intentionality around design, how you're setting up your sessions with structure and frame, so you can show up and dance in the moment, so you can co-create with your group. So I think part of this whole belonging design from a coaching standpoint, and group coaching especially, is fundamental.
Love it. And again, I think it is a belonging. It's a human experience. Really, back to Lenny.
Yeah.
Right? Lenny keeps showing up in these calls.
I know.
This little mantra of like human, because we are really in an interesting era. Here is the final piece of this puzzle for today.
Yeah.
We are on the precipice of, really diving into the next phase of AI. And it was only last week that they released the latest chat GPT update. Some experts, and I'm not an expert in AI, but I follow it closely. But this notion of singularity, which is at what point will the human species and the AI sort of have equal capability? And some are saying 6 years or less. Like, imagine, and just even think in the last year, the impact of how AI has transformed the world of work. We're only starting to see an initial piece of this. But what makes us different? It is our ability to connect and to belong and to be human. And I think, as some people are using the term wisdom keepers of an old era, right? Like, we are really on a potential precipice of one of the world's biggest shifts, if things play out as some people imagine. And it's going to mean that this notion of human connection, of human connectivity, of emotion becomes so much more important, because that can't be replicated by a non-human. So it's fascinating. It's possibly quite scary. I think it's so revolutionary, like truly to radical change, that some people are not even noticing it. And I think there are so many other things that are distracting people's attention from watching and seeing and even having access to that information about what is happening, because we're in a world right now where there are so many messages. How do you discern? What do you discern? Right? If you go back to the science of it, it's our reticular activating system. What are we choosing to pay attention to?
Yes.
Asking our brains to pay attention to.
Yeah.
What are the messages that we're listening to, which choose our focus? So there's a much bigger layer of this conversation, but I want to sort of surface it to say, what are you choosing to focus on as well? Because it's a choice.
I love it. And what comes to mind as you say that is, in the work that I do, I often kind of coin it like the paralyzers of progress, right? AI, it's progressing. And so as business leaders, as coaches, as humans, what is our relationship to that? Is it actually, are we using it as a catalyzer to actually maybe bring productivity and efficiency to certain things that we can use it as coaches? It can be a tool. I know that I use it.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, what I'm really getting clear on is, for those who are avoiding it, what's like that fear? What is underneath that hold on, no, like, I don't want to know what AI is capable of because it's going to take me out of a job. Well, hold on. How can you become friends with it? How can you leverage it in a way that is actually serving to you? Because I love what you said, because you took the words right out of my mouth, is AI can't replace emotion.
Yeah.
It can't, when emotion, that connection heart to heart, that connection, AI can't do that. And so I'm going to say, is that your stretch? Is that your growth? Is that range? Let's bring back range. Is that where your range is? Thinking about those 4 focus areas of awareness. A lot of people are in that space. Like, where is your strength and where's your growth edge? Because this, especially in the world of AI, this is where our superpower can really activate us to keep us standing out, but also keep us progressing in the world of change, in the world of chaos, in the world of AI. So how do we work in these parameters so we can flourish as human beings, and in turn help others flourish in their journey?
Yeah. And truly, that may be a future episode. It'll be interesting to revisit this episode in a couple months, another year. I think it's a part of the world that is changing, and coaching, as we've said in many episodes, really is that it's an important vehicle in the change process. How are we building capability? How are we boosting collaboration? How are we building better cultures? This is like the fabric of my latest writing this fall. And so I really felt like belonging, we have to also bring in, how will this differentiate what we do, who we are as a human species as well.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Interesting times. Well, listeners, we would love to hear from you as always. What are your thoughts on this? What is important as you think about what the spaces and places that you create? How are you fostering a greater sense of connection, emotion, and belonging? As always, Yvonne, I love sitting down and having a conversation with you. Any final thoughts?
I think it's a beautiful place to end. Yeah. Well said.
All right, everyone. We will see you for our next episode. Be well. Take care.